Okay, buckle up, folks. Today on the Mystery Archive, we're delving further into phantom time. So strap in, as this is a wild ride. What if everything we know about history is wrong? What if we've been lied to? Not just a small mistake in textbooks, but something far bigger. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that entire centuries of human history never actually happened, that they were fabricated, misplaced, or erased. It sounds like science fiction, right? But what if I told you that this might already have happened? From the missing years of Jesus to a century of Roman history that barely left a trace, to entire civilizations vanishing overnight, our past is full of black holes. So, the real question is history a lie? And if time has been rewritten before, could it still be happening today? Let's find out. Now, let's start with the classical and ancient world. History is supposed to be a straight line, one event leading to another, neatly recorded and preserved. But what if that's not how it works? What if entire periods of time have been lost, erased, or manipulated? And what if it all started with the most influential figure in human history? The lost years of Jesus. Jesus is one of the most documented figures in history. His teachings shaped religions, empires, and entire civilizations. Yet, despite this, 18 years of his life are completely missing. The Bible gives us glimpses of Jesus' early years, his birth, the visit of the Magi, his time in the temple at age 12, and then silence. For nearly 2 decades, historical records go completely dark. When Jesus reappears at age 30, he's no longer the child from Nazareth. He's a wise, fully formed spiritual leader. He speaks in parables, performs miracles, and challenges the religious authorities of the time. So, where was he? Some researchers believe Jesus traveled to India or Tibet, learning from Buddhist monks and Hindu mystics. They point to similarities between Jesus' teachings and Eastern philosophy, his emphasis on love, compassion, and detachment from material wealth. Others suggest he was trained by the Essenes, a secretive Jewish sect known for their ascetic lifestyle and mystical knowledge. This could explain his deep understanding of scripture and prophecy. Then there's a theory that Jesus traveled to Egypt, studying with scholars in Alexandria, which was a hub of ancient wisdom at the time. And then there's the possibility that his missing years were deliberately erased. Think about it. If Jesus learned something powerful during those missing years, something that threatened the control of religious or political authorities, wouldn't it make sense to remove that knowledge from history? What if Jesus' real teachings were far more radical than we've been told? What if his message was altered or worse, censored? So, let me get this straight. We've got detailed tax records from ancient Rome, but when it comes to the most famous person in history, we just lose nearly 2 decades of his life. Was Jesus on a gap year? Did he spend his 20s backpacking through India? Or maybe he was just chilling on a beach thinking, man, I should start a religion one day. Well, seriously, if anyone else disappeared for 18 years, we'd have questions. Imagine if Elvis had just vanished in his 20s and reappeared as a spiritual guru. We'd be like, wait, where have you been? Look, I'm not saying there's a cover-up, but I'm not saying that either. The Roman Dark Century, 534 to 640 AD. All right, let's fast forward a few hundred years to another giant hole in history. When the Western Roman Empire fell, Europe was plunged into what we call the Dark Ages. But here's where it gets weird. Between 534 and 640 AD, records become strangely scarce. Cities stopped expanding. Coinage barely changed. Written records are nearly non-existent. Historians struggle to explain this gap. Some believe it was simply a chaotic time with fewer people writing things down. But others, they think something far stranger happened. A time manipulation. One theory suggests that this period never actually existed, that it was fabricated to suit the needs of the powerful rulers. Why? Because in the late 10th century, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III had a problem. He wanted his reign to be associated with the grand symbolic year of 1000 AD, but the real date didn't match. So, according to this theory, Otto III and Pope Sylvester II simply invented nearly 300 years of history, including the so-called Dark Century. Think about it. If you control the calendars, the historians, and the records, who's going to argue? And here's where it gets even creepier. Some of the major historical figures from this time might not have even existed. One of the biggest targets? Charlemagne. That's right, the great king, the legendary warrior, the man credited with shaping medieval Europe, might have been completely made up. If this theory is true, then everything we think we know about this era, the wars, the rulers, the entire medieval timeline could be built on a lie. Okay, we just lost an entire century. That is next level forgetfulness. I lose my phone twice a day, but at least I don't misplace a civilization. And I love how historians just call this the Dark Ages, like that's a valid excuse. Oh yeah, nothing really happened for 100 years, we totally didn't make stuff up. And Charlemagne might have been fictional? So what? Did medieval people just Photoshop him onto old coins? I mean, if Otto III really faked history just to make it the year 1000, respect. That is some next level calendar hacking. Now let's move on to the medieval erasures and what was hidden. Now, by the medieval period, history really should have been more structured. Kingdoms were rising, trade was expanding, and literacy, while still rare, was increasing. Yet, when we look at the records, we find bizarre gaps, missing years, and entire civilizations mysteriously collapsing with no explanation. So what or who was erasing time? Now, could powerful institutions have rewritten history for their own benefit? Let's dig in. The Vatican's missing century, 9th to the 10th century AD. For over 1,000 years, one institution has held immense power over historical records, the Vatican. But what if, instead of preserving history, the Church altered it? Between the 9th and 10th centuries, something strange happens. This period, often called the Saeculum Obscurum or the Dark Age of the Papacy, is notorious for missing records, contradictory accounts, and unexplained gaps in leadership. At times, multiple popes were ruling at once, and sometimes their records vanish entirely. Some historians claim that this was simply an era of corruption and instability, where popes were little more than political puppets controlled by powerful Roman families. But what if something darker was happening? What were they hiding? The Vatican is one of the largest secret archives in the world, containing documents so sensitive that only a handful of people are allowed to see them. Many conspiracy theorists believe that during this missing century, the Church was not just covering up corruption, but actively rewriting history. Why? Maybe certain texts contradicted official Church teachings and needed to be erased. Maybe entire historical figures were fabricated or removed to reshape religious doctrine. Or maybe the timeline itself was altered. If the Vatican had the power to control knowledge, then rewriting history wouldn't just be possible, it would be inevitable. Alright, so the Vatican might have lost a century. Yeah, sure, that's totally normal. I mean, I lose my socks in the dryer, but at least I don't misplace 100 years. And the secret archives? Look, when an institution calls something secret, it's begging for people to speculate. And you don't name a room the Forbidden Chamber unless there's something juicy in there. So, did the Vatican rewrite history? Well, honestly, I don't know. But let's be real, if anyone could pull it off, it's them. The Forgotten 100 Years of China, 841 to 907 AD. While the Vatican was losing track of time, something equally strange was happening on the other side of the world. China, one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world, suddenly plunges into chaos. During the mid-9th century, the mighty Tang dynasty was at its peak. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, between 841 and 907 AD, we enter what historians call a Dark Age. What happened? For an entire century, China sees a collapse of government authority, widespread destruction of historical texts, a breakdown in record keeping, almost as if someone wanted this era to disappear. The Great Purge of Knowledge. One key event during this time was the Great Buddhist Persecution, 845 AD, where the Chinese emperor ordered the destruction of thousands of temples, books, and relics. Tens of thousands of monks were forcibly removed from monasteries, and religious scholars were erased from history. This wasn't just an attack on religion, this was an attack on knowledge itself. And this conveniently happened right as China entered this missing century. Was this just political instability, or was there something bigger happening? If history was being rewritten in Europe and in Asia at the same time, could this be evidence that something or someone was manipulating time on a global scale? Alright, let me get this straight. In the 9th century, the Vatican was rewriting history in Europe, and at the exact same time, China was burning its own records. Yeah, doesn't sound suspicious at all. But if two roommates both claim they lost the same $100 on the same day, somebody is lying. And the whole great purge of knowledge thing? Classic. Oh no, we're totally not hiding anything, we just accidentally destroyed all the books. Whoops. Right, and I'm the Emperor of Mars. The missing 100 years of the Maya, 750 to 850 AD. Okay, let's move to Central America, because guess what? The Maya also lost a century. One of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient world, the Maya, had incredible knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. They built massive cities, developing writing systems that had incredibly accurate calendars. Then, suddenly, between 750 and 850 AD, something bizarre happens. Major cities collapse overnight. Monuments stop being built, records disappear. It's as if an entire population just walked away, without warning, without explanation. What caused the Mayan collapse? Theories range from environmental catastrophe, war and social unrest, mass famine. But what if it wasn't a natural disaster? What if their history was erased? Some researchers suggest that Mayan knowledge was deliberately suppressed, possibly by early European explorers who wanted to control the narrative of the New World. Or even crazier, what if the Maya discovered something they weren't supposed to? Their calendar was eerily precise, so much so that some believe they understood time in ways we can't even comprehend. Could they have been manipulating time, and was this knowledge erased before it spread? Okay, so I've got questions. So the Maya, one of the smartest civilizations in human history, just ghosted us? I imagine if New York City was fully abandoned overnight and people 1,000 years later just went, "Oh, well, must have been a drought." Come on, that is way too convenient. And the whole Mayan calendar was too accurate thing? What were they doing? Running simulations of reality? I swear, the more we dig into history, the weirder it gets. Moving on to the later medieval anomalies, lost civilizations and hidden secrets. Now, by the later medieval period, we should be in well-documented historical territory. After all, the world was becoming more connected. Trade routes stretched across continents, written records were becoming more common, and powerful institutions were thriving. So, why do we still find gaps in history? Entire groups disappear. Civilizations fell overnight. Entire centuries seem out of sync. Coincidence? Or could it be evidence that history isn't as complete as we think? Now let's dig into three of the strangest historical black holes. The ghost years of the Islamic Golden Age, 1258 to 1350 AD, a civilization reset. If we travel back to the Middle East around the year 1200 AD, we'd witness one of the most advanced civilizations in human history. The Islamic Golden Age produced groundbreaking scientific discoveries, pioneering medical advancements and mathematical concepts still used today. Then, in 1258, something happens. The Mongols invade Baghdad, the beating heart of the Islamic world, and they don't just conquer it, they erase it. They destroy the House of Wisdom, a library holding centuries of knowledge, scientific texts lost forever, historical records leaving behind massive gaps. Historians estimate that nearly 800,000 people were slaughtered. But here's the real mystery. The destruction wasn't just physical, it was intellectual. For the next 100 years, historical progress seems to stall. The Islamic world goes from leading global innovation to silence. What happened? Some believe this wasn't just an invasion, it was a deliberate attempt to reset history. Could the Mongols have been used by unseen forces to wipe out an era of progress? And if so, who benefited? The Mongols burned an entire civilization to the ground, and in the process, they accidentally hit the reset button on history. That's like if aliens invaded Earth and only destroyed Google, Wikipedia, and every university on the planet. And what happens next? A century of missing knowledge. Very convenient. You know, the Mongols were great at conquest, but I doubt they had a delete history button. So, the real question is, was someone else pulling the strings? The lost era of the Knights Templar, 1307 to 1500 AD. If we had to name one medieval group that was deeply mysterious, it would be the Knights Templar. They were warrior monks, a weird combination, right? They had immense power and wealth, and most importantly, they disappeared overnight. In 1307, the French king, Philip IV, decided that Templars needed to go. What followed was a brutal purge. Mass arrests, executions, forced confessions under torture. By 1312, the Knights Templar ceased to exist. Or did they? The missing years. After their fall, we have suspiciously few records of their wealth, influence, or members actually went. Some believe they fled to Switzerland and secretly influenced the banking system. Others think they became the Freemasons, rebranding themselves to operate in secrecy. And some believe they took something valuable with them, something so powerful that history itself was altered to erase its existence. If the Templars were hiding something, wouldn't it make sense to erase the records? After all, what better way to protect a secret than to erase the people who knew it? Okay. So, the Templars went from ruling the medieval world to a bunch of missing person cases overnight. And we're just supposed to believe they all disappeared. Come on. That's like if Amazon suddenly vanished and we all just pretended it never existed. And let's talk about their missing treasure, because apparently these guys had a vault full of gold, relics, and maybe even secret knowledge. And it all just goes poof, vanishes. Yeah, sure. So, the real question is, what were the Templars hiding? And more importantly, where did they go? The missing time in Pre-Columbian America, 1300 to 1492 AD. Now let's shift to the Americas, a place we often think of as untouched before European explorers arrived. But the truth is much more mysterious. Before Columbus set foot in 1492, civilizations like the Aztecs, Inca, and Mississippians were thriving. Then suddenly, between 1300 and 1492, we see abandoned cities, drastic population decline, and a sudden lack of written records. It's almost as if someone hit the reset button. Were the pre-Columbian civilizations erased? Now this raises a huge question. Was history rearranged to make it seem like Europeans discovered America? Now think about it. If the Aztecs had a thriving empire in the 1300s, why don't we have more records? Why do we find advanced structures that don't match the official timeline? And why does history treat the Americas like they were a blank slate before 1492? Could it be that a powerful force wanted to control the narrative, ensuring that Europe was credited as the civilized world, while other cultures were portrayed as mysterious, primitive, or extinct? And if history was manipulated once, how many other times has it been rewritten? Okay, so let me get this straight. Before 1492, the Aztecs, Inca, and other civilizations just randomly start disappearing. Well, it sounds super convenient if you're an explorer looking to claim new land. And don't even get me started on Machu Picchu. That place is way too advanced for the timeline we are given. But sure, let's ignore all the weird gaps and pretend history just makes perfect sense. Totally normal. Nothing suspicious here at all, right? Okay, now we're into the home stretch. Theories and modern manipulations. Are we still losing time? So far, we've uncovered gaps in history, centuries that seem to have vanished. Ancient civilizations disappearing without explanation. Medieval records mysteriously altered. Entire empires leaving behind glaring holes in their timelines. But what if this isn't just about the past? What if history isn't just missing, but being manipulated? Or maybe we've been losing time this whole time. And if that's true, then the biggest question of all isn't what happened, it's who is doing it and why. Historical time loops. Are we repeating the same events? Ever get that feeling of déjà vu? Like something that just happened has already happened before. Well, what if that feeling wasn't just in your head? History repeating itself. When we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, history starts to look suspiciously repetitive. Wars, revolutions, economic crashes over and over across centuries. And not just similar events, eerily identical ones. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815 versus World War II, 1939 to 1945. A European leader rises, attempts a massive conquest, then fails. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 versus what we all experienced back in 2020. Both major global pandemics, both reshaping economies and societies in strikingly similar ways. The Roman Republic collapsing into an empire, just like many say is happening with modern democracies. Coincidence or something more? Some researchers suggest that time itself might be cyclical, meaning that the past isn't just influencing the future, it's repeating. Could history be a program running in loops? And if so, who's pressing reset? Okay, so you're telling me history is just one big rerun, some cosmic Netflix series where they just reboot the same plot every 100 years. Actually, that does make a lot of sense. Have you ever noticed how every new fashion trend is just old fashion coming back in? Bell-bottom jeans, boomerang from the 1970s, mullets, they refused to die in the 80s and now they're back. Now we've got vinyl records outselling CDs again. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Julius Caesar just had bad Yelp reviews instead of assassination conspiracies. But hey, if history is looping, then can we at least skip the bad parts? The 20th century, time manipulation. Did we skip an entire era? Now, here's where things get weird. If history has been altered before, then why would it suddenly stop? What if modern history has its own erased years? And what if some of us remember them? And did we skip an entire era? Let's take a closer look at the 20th century. We went from the Wright brothers to inventing the airplane in 1903 to landing on the moon in 1969. In less than 70 years, we jumped from barely leaving the ground to sending men into space. And yet, in the 50 years since, progress seems oddly slower. No moon bases, no flying cars, no promised Jetsons-style future. It's almost as if something changed. The Mandela Effect, proof of a shifted timeline. Then there's this phenomenon, where huge groups of people remember the past differently than how it's recorded. Berenstain Bears or Berenstein Bears. Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s or in 2013. The Monopoly Man, monocle or no monocle. Could the Mandela Effect be evidence that the timelines are being rewritten in real time? And if so, who's rewriting them? All right, hold up. So we go from wagons and telegrams to the moon in just a few decades. Then suddenly, technology progress just pauses. Now, that's like downloading a video game update and suddenly losing half the features. Don't even get me started on the Mandela Effect. If I wake up tomorrow and find out pizza never existed, I'm officially leaving this timeline. The phantom time hypothesis 2. Is this more evidence? So, let's put all the pieces together. Ancient and medieval history is full of gaps. Entire civilizations vanish, and we're left with contradictory records. Modern history has its own missing pieces, from erased historical events to Mandela Effect glitches. Now, could it be that history itself is an illusion, carefully crafted to make us believe a timeline that never really happened? And here's the biggest question of all: why? Who benefits from altering time? If the timeline has been edited, that means someone, some group, some force has the power to manipulate reality itself. Could it be a hidden elite rewriting history for control? A breakaway civilization editing time to shape the world? An AI system altering our past to steer our future? Or is this just what happens when the universe crashes and reloads an old save file? The truth is, we may never know. But if time has been manipulated before, what's stopping it from happening again? All right, let's just recap. Our history is full of missing centuries. Time might be looping, the 20th century might have been edited, and reality itself might just be one big patch update. Great, cool, just another normal day on the internet. At this point, if I wake up tomorrow and suddenly my name is spelled differently, I think I'm just going to roll with it. Stay curious, my friends. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Please like and subscribe, and all that good stuff is free and really helps out our small little channel. Okay, until next time, stay curious.